Hey everyone, let's take a break from the American system, right? Let's do that. We see too much American news. We see too much of what's wrong with America. Let's have a look at some good old Great British flaws, shall we? This is Culture Catz, who I'd like to recommend for you all today. He's done a great video, and I'd like to just go through it and add a couple of comments, and then recommend that you go over and watch his channel. Let him know that I sent you. The link to the video is in description. Let's get on.
Hello and welcome back. Now, for those of you who don't know, I was a full-on, full-time science teacher in the UK for 20 years. And in the videos this week, I'm going to be looking at the vulnerabilities of our own education system and how science deniers and conspiracy theorists might have opportunities, or sometimes have taken opportunities, to try and wind our education system back. Christians are good people, yeah. And we live our lives for the betterment of mankind. Not like you, you're just a cheese sandwich who lives his life trying not to be the last cheese sandwich on the plate. It gets really lonely, maybe find a sausage on a cocktail stick to talk to. I don't care if you're Christian, I don't care if you're Muslim, I don't care if you're Jewish, Sikh or Hindu, I don't care what your religion is. I don't judge you as a good or bad person based on whatever your religious belief is. I just don't care. You could think that Jodie Whittaker was a better Doctor Who than David Tennant, and I wouldn't care. If you follow my videos, the way that I've always wanted to come across, and I hope that I've managed it in most people's eyes, is that I'm against the misrepresentation of science. When those young Earth creationists in that last video stopped me, the same young Earth creationists who told me straight to my face that I was a liar who lied to children because I taught them science, but whose own limited scientific understanding meant that they couldn't tell me what an isotope was, or that they thought carbon dating was used to date rocks. That's where I draw the line. People like that, who have no understanding about science whatsoever, trying to infiltrate the minds and the education of our youth to try and put some kind of distrust between actual science and the children. I don't like that. That is what I hate. So if you think I hate people purely because of their religion, or I just hate people because I like hating people, then you are wrong, and I really hate you. I don't really hate you. And for me to be able to do that and explain how I feel the education system is under threat from religion and religious groups, a little bit anyway, in England, then I need to start off by getting the cat in to tell you about the different types of school we've got in England. A great way to tell the difference between the different types of schools in the UK is to look at where the money comes from. Here is the government, here is our first type of school. It's called a maintained school. A maintained school is funded by the government, giving money to the local education authority, who then pass it on to the school, and in almost all circumstances, a maintained school's building and its ground will be owned by the local education authority. Now, if you're my age, you almost certainly went to a maintained school. And we can recognise maintained school because when we walk into them, we can see that the toilet roll in the bathroom is made out of some sort of tracing paper type material, which is only good for creating interesting collages on the inside of your underpants. Academies receive their funding straight from the government, and they're often run by an academy trust who, in most circumstances, will own the building and the land. Now, the interesting thing about academies is that an academy trust can own 1, 2, 3, as many schools as they want to run. And they can call that an academy chain, or a MAT, a multi-academy trust. Now, the advantage of a multi-academy trust is that some executive principal can be dropped in, and he can turn all the schools into a McDonald's type franchise that sucks the life and soul and personality and any joy that you would normally find in a school out of all the academies. It really is a truly special thing. And then we have voluntary aided and voluntary controlled schools. They are slightly different, but close enough that I'm going to call them the same thing for the purpose of this video. However, independent schools receive their money from the students who go to the school, from past members of the alumni, and just other rich people that for some reason like giving their money to schools. They are completely separate from the government and therefore are not required to be inspected by Ofsted. But I actually think that the situation in some of our schools is a lot worse. And we need a little bit of a history lesson. So this is the current law for maintained schools in England. You can find this yourself on the DfE website. Otherwise, you can just Google religious education collective worship. We can see the date of issue is 1994. There's no expiry date. This is still current law. And as far as I'm aware, there's no intention to review it. When it says collective worship, if we do a quick search, we can see here that it says, right, worship really isn't defined properly in legislation, but it should be concerned with reverence or veneration paid to a divine being or power. Should a school choose to enforce this, the law would 100% support them. And the reason a lot of schools can kind of worm their way around this is this sentence here, that collective worship can be related to the day-to-day life and aspirations and concerns of the school. So we can focus what we're doing on that rather than actual worship, some divine being. This sentence here, taking part, implies more than simply passive attendance to those sessions. Even though on particular occasions, some of the pupils may not feel able actively to identify with the act of worship.
So yeah, I'm going to leave it there. Obviously, Culture Catz has got an amazing channel and it is a very interesting video. I really highly suggest you all go over and watch the full-length thing. But hopefully, just that little clip for the Americans among my audience here has shown you the difference between your system and ours. And hopefully you feel quite grateful to have that separation between church and state enforced. We seem to have the exact opposite, and so therefore for the Brits in my audience, hopefully that's a bit of a wake-up call for you guys. I had no idea that all this was going on. Now, for full context, when I was at primary school, and I've been informed by Catz that these days he hasn't got a great deal of information in the primary school system either, but when I was at school, we had to do the Lord's Prayer every day in assembly. It was every morning. We'd go to assembly and then a teacher or the head would stand at the front of the room and lead us all in prayer. I remember my year 4 teacher was Christian, and that made me laugh. The fact that an adult believed in, I believe it was Noah's Ark that she was trying to teach us, as if it was actually a story based in reality. But in secondary school, we had tutor group at the start of every day where we were in small groups, and that's where Catz said that if the tutor were to enforce a prayer section, then we would all be forced to take part in that, apparently. That's in secondary school. But that obviously completely flew under the radar for me at school. We had religious education where we learned about all kinds of different religions from an outside perspective. And I very much got the impression that my RE teacher back then was, in fact, atheist. He was able to look at all these religions through the lens of an outsider, and yet at the same time held a massive amount of respect for them. So his Quran, for example, was the highest book in the room. He left it on a shelf above all the others, and that was long before any kind of Muslim integration into England became a huge deal. And it was in the south, so we were far away from like the Bradford Muslims and things like that. It wasn't done because there was any Muslims in the school or even in the area, is what I'm saying. We lived in villages in the rural sticks at that time. So yeah, like the religious education I fully backed. And at that point, for me, I'm looking at the separation between church and state, and I think that's ridiculous. I think it stops you from learning about other cultures, and it means that the only example of Christianity that you're educated about is the example from Christians themselves. You never get the opportunity to see it from an outside lens or to compare it to other cultures. And that, to me, is an absolute detriment to the American education system. And that's been the position I've held right up until I saw this video. And now I'm thinking to myself, well, that's the lesser of two evils. As a child, I obviously must have had good parents who instilled in me the difference between fairy tales and reality. When I heard it, I could decipher the difference for myself. Even when adults came over to me and explained it to me as if it was fact, my childlike brain was still able to say, oh, this poor adult believes this fairy tale. I'm not in a position to correct them. I'm just a child. But obviously that's not enough evidence for me to believe it. That's absolute lunacy. You have to show me more than that, you know? But not all children are in that position, obviously. I've got no idea where that came from in me. I'm so proud of myself for having that realization at such an early age. It's concerning that that's not more common. And I can only attribute that to my parents and my upbringing. They must have done an absolutely amazing job with me as a tiny child. I don't know what else to say about it. It's scary to me, this whole situation. I'm genuinely worried. I know it seems silly because we're quite a secular society, and you'd think it would take some kind of uprising, but you know, even just one tutor is not only allowed to get away with this, but the law prohibits us from stopping them. And one tutor has 30 children under their care every year, right? The same group of children for 5 years. That's right. Yeah, 5 years. So a tutor gets like, what, 30 kids, I assume? That's roughly what it was when I was at school, for 5 years. And then another group of 30 kids. Those 30 kids aren't just statistics. It's not just, oh, well, it's only 30 kids, is it? That's every single year. This teacher is literally ruining lives of human beings. And they think they're doing it for the right reasons.